You're probably familiar with the old saying, never be the smartest person in the room. But if you're J.R. Hildebrand, that's virtually impossible. He's the smartest guy I know in racing. A 12-time starter at the Indianapolis 500. Indy Next by Firestone champion back in 2009. He's done the Pikes Peak Hill Climb, IMSA, you name it. Great to catch up with JR. And we were thinking about who best we could get to describe what drivers and teams are going through in a week like this leading up to the Indy 500 Open Test. And we knew you could explain everything eloquently. So no pressure.
Yeah, much appreciated. That's you're laying it on thick at the beginning to get me nice and tuned up for this.
Yeah.
Appreciate
Uh,
it.
no, you're the best, man. Thanks for doing this. First of all, before we talk about that, you want to catch up a little bit for people that want to know what you're doing. What are you doing?
Yeah, man, got certainly staying busy. There's no question about that. Have a 2-year-old daughter in the house now, so that's keeping us busy as much as anything on on the professional side. But yeah, getting ready for Pikes Peak Hill Climb coming up in June. Got some other programs that'll be after that are still sort of yet to be fully announced. But yeah, I've been, since competing last at the Speedway, obviously always looking for ways to get back on track at Indy. It's just such a special place that I've been fortunate to be able to really make a living and a career out of building a career out of just racing at the 500, and for a lot of years. So I certainly have a lot of appreciation for that, and I just love turning laps around the place like one way or the other. I'd show up in the middle of winter if there was a chance to go do a few laps. So, um, there's obviously staying around the IndyCar paddock and keeping up with people is a part of the game. Same thing in some other places. I've done 24 Hours Daytona and done some other IMSA stuff over the last few years, which was exciting. But frankly, starting to think a little bit more about what are some of the things outside of just being a hired gun or whatever that are interesting, and that's considering what other opportunities there are inside of teams. You know, kind of considering what team ownership looks like, and maybe not at the IndyCar level, but just in different places. And it's exciting to look at the motorsport landscape from a little bit more of a zoomed out point of view. You mentioned that I've, over particularly the last 5 or 6 years, gone and done just kind of anything that's got four wheels. I'll go give it a whirl, and that's been really exciting, and met a lot of great people doing that. So yeah, just keeping my foot in the door wherever I can, and yeah, it's been a fun couple of years here looking at it that way.
Yeah. You're kind of old school in that regard. So if you're driving anything with four wheels on it, that's very old school. So I dig that. So that's cool. Hey, all right. So Indy 500 Open Test. How important can a test like this be?
It's important for a couple of reasons, particularly this year, and I guess I would say just as time has evolved here. One of those reasons is just because there's the time that you have on track in preparation for qualifying weekend is more condensed than it sort of has ever been. Just we kind of continue to whittle away at the available days, basically. So sometimes the days have gotten longer; they've been extended. But you think about the teams, what you're really thinking about is you get one day of weather in there, and it doesn't make any difference how long the days are. It just completely wipes out, your entire day. Even days that are super windy. I mean, that's happened at times over the last few years, and affects the way that you're able to go about your planning. So I think it's particularly we now have this. You have almost a full additional day, or the better part of an additional day on Monday after qualifying weekend, which has kind of been added in to make up for some of that time loss on the front end. But when you're thinking about just getting up to qualifying and being prepared for qualifying, that day doesn't really help you much at that point. So this is in part, teams will be looking at this just as an extension off the front end of more practice time, getting ready for the first part of it. That's why it's important, I guess, on one hand. The other part of it is it's going to be the first time certainly in a big group, and first time for some teams and some drivers driving the car with the hybrid unit at the speedway. So this year in particular, that will be factoring in, pretty significantly to just the way that teams are looking at what they want to get out of these upcoming couple of days.
How you feel about this? I haven't asked you about this yet, but I think in qualifying, I think you'll see everyone be pretty similar in how they regen or deploy the hybrid system. In in race trim, though, on race day, it can really stir some things up, right?
Yeah, definitely. I think in qualifying, particularly on the oval, just because there's not a regen opportunity once you get going. I think, like you said, there'll be a couple of different teams will be playing. That's part of what teams will be messing around with this week on Thursday, the second day. There's a block of time allocated just for high boost running, which you would only do qualifying simulation with that high boost target. So that you'll see everybody out there utilizing that time for that reason. And some of that time definitely will be soaked up within teams, splitting up some different on multi-car teams, splitting up some different thoughts or strategies around how do you deploy the hybrid energy basically that you'll start your qualifying run with. So just throwing some things at the wall like what is it like what does your run look like if you fire it all off during the first lap? What does it look like if you use it over the first couple of laps? What does it look like if you try to conserve some of it so that you're using it throughout the 4 laps? um, just trying to kind of understand what are the compromises, what are the trade-offs between those different potential strategies that are out there. I mean, I think it's worth just noting again. I think we even within the paddock, you sometimes kind of forget about it because once you get to the speedway, it's just such a different animal in so many ways. But it's basically the longest qualifying run that you'll make throughout the year. I mean, even at a road or street circuit, not even factoring in the hybrid component of this whole thing, at a road or street circuit, you're still just ripping 1 lap and then usually backing off and doing another lap. So 4 continuous laps, and they all count, is pretty different, really. And definitely when you throw in these components, I mean, we just you think about qualifying at Indianapolis differently for that reason, just in terms of your engine prep for the first lap, regardless of hybridization or deployment that you're really in control of. So that'll be a factor here, and teams I think will. I'm sure everybody has a simulated optimal scenario already, but they'll still go mess around with some things just to sort of see how it ends up actually shaking out in real life. And so to your point, in all likelihood, by the time we show up at qualifying, there you'll probably see most teams doing one of a couple of things. Um, but yeah, exactly like you said, once you get to the race, it'll be the way that you've seen it so far, which is, drivers using it in all kinds of different scenarios, and being, I think a big part of it, particularly at the speedways or just the oval races, is just building up a familiarity with it so that it really is second nature in the car, so that you don't kind of just get caught out a little bit by not using it when you should have, or something like that. So trying to for the drivers, it's about trying to turn it into something that you can kind of subconsciously just react with when you need it, rather than it being something that, to start out with, it'll be something that they're having to think a lot about while they're driving. Like, okay, should I use it now, or what's the timing of this, or do I leave it on or pull it off, or whatever. So, and I think it's important to mention that just in the context that it's not like push to pass, in that you've got a certain amount of it, and like there is a regen component to
Yeah.
get it back to then use it again. So it's just a more, sort of layered, process basically, to optimize.
Yeah. For many drivers, as if they weren't busy or weren't already busy enough inside the cockpit. Now you got an extra button and some other thoughts to go through. But I guess question for you. I mean, basically you've got 6 hours Wednesday. You got 2.5 hours of that high boost session Thursday morning, and then let's call it another basically 3 hours Thursday afternoon. To your point, can it almost be too much time? Like if you're going down the wrong path, all of a sudden you might go down a rabbit hole, and then then you start really scratching your head by the time it's all said and done.
Yeah, it's interesting.
which is
I've
the last
having
thing I
done
know
these.
anybody wants to do. I realize
No,
that.
yeah, you're right though. Having done these tests a lot over the years, I've definitely been on different sides of the fence from that perspective. But teams will. That even is a part of the strategic thinking of what you're going to do at this test versus the way you might treat the first 2 days of practice of Indianapolis 500, qualifying week. And the reason I bring that up is broadly speaking, the I don't want to call it, it's not the conservative way of looking at this, but sort of just the practical way of looking at this is everybody's always feeling like they're running out of time to make the car better rolling into qualifying. They're always feeling like there's, changes that they wish they'd had the chance to make coming into um, you know, uh carb day, going into race day. So the sort of practical thing to do is just start with what you think you know and start working on the mechanical balance of the car with with the package that you intend that you expect basically to be using going into the race these days. And this has been the case, I would say, for the majority of my period of time here in the IndyCar series. We'll say certainly from DW12, to the contemporaries, to sort of using this chassis that the I think there may have once been a time in the IndyCar series where if you looked at the setup sheet for a team for qualifying, that was quite different from the setup sheet for the race, just in terms of the springs, shock package, roll centers, all of these kinds of things. These days, there could certainly still be teams that you'd see that difference, but there's a, a number of the highest qualifying, highest performing race winning teams. There's just not that big of a difference. So that works in the favor of teams generally, that you can sort of work on one mechanical package for both as you approach. You can do it at the higher downforce, lower boost target, and sort of have the reasonable expectation that then once you get to higher boost and you start trimming the car out, that you're not going to have something completely different for going and qualifying, and executing on those days at your highest level. So I'm basically bringing all of that up to say the practical thing to do here is just to start working on that mechanical balance. All of the teams talked about how big a factor the addition of the hybrid unit was last year to their mechanical balance, to the point that a lot of the teams basically said the biggest difference for us in terms of overall performance with the hybrid unit is just, can we get back to where we have the balance of the car being what we think it's going to be while the hybrid unit is being deployed and regenning and all of these things. So my personal take would be most teams will just be going with what they expect to use rolling into to sort of qualifying week, and are going to just start the tuning process now on that. But it is a time, because you do have a couple of weeks here in between this test and when you actually get on track for Indy 500, for the month of May, we'll say, um, that if you have outlying question marks, like things that you're just not really sure of, that maybe you think could be big gains, but are a risk, or there's something that's going to take a long time for you to set the car up this way and then go back to the pad and reorient it back another way, or whatever. I've definitely been in scenarios where these test days are where you try that stuff, because you've got the time to really soak in all the data, and you don't have to then immediately make that call for which direction you're going to go. The following day at practice that starts 10 o'clock in the morning or whatever. So I think it's in most cases, you'll see teams just starting to work on the mechanical balance that they expect to use going into race week. But it's not a bad time to go down some of those rabbit holes, that you mentioned earlier, if you're going to do it.
Better now than qualifying week in May, without a question, right? Probably. So, ideally, then, how do teams want to feel when their 2 days are over this week?
I think you probably want to feel a couple of things. You want to feel like your baseline race package is on the right track. That's unquestionably the main thing that you want to feel coming out of Thursday this week, that the car felt good for the drivers, that they were confident bending the car into the corner and sticking to a late turn-in arc and doing all the things that you need to be able to do from a driver's perspective just to maximize what you then are going to be able to extract out of the car's grip and performance in both a race and a qualifying situation. Like I said before, I mean, my experience certainly has been that feels good for one of those things in terms of inspiring confidence. It's good starting point for the other, and vice versa. The other
If
part
you
of that is,
if you feel like you're behind Thursday afternoon, are, at what point does panic set in?
I think there's a big enough gap that at
You've got
least
time,
you could convince yourself that it's not time to panic. It probably depends on where you're at, what your expectations were coming in, and really
right?
how bad you felt like you were. I mean, the panic starts to set in, frankly, you when you have known what the problem is for, like, if you rolled off the truck and the car was crappy, straight off the truck on Wednesday, and you just didn't make any progress with it over the course of 2 days, then you will definitely have some panic. If you've been on the go down the rabbit hole mode over 2 days and you've just been trying a bunch of stuff to try to check some boxes, and maybe none of that stuff really pans out, then you're kind of like, all right, well, maybe ultimately that was kind of that you could look at that was a waste of time in that scenario, but at least you've narrowed down, the things that you're going to work on, and the direction that you think you need to go when you come back for race day. So, or come back for, sort of the true month of May.
This is kind of random. You've been around this game long enough. True or false? It's more difficult than ever to win the Indianapolis 500.
I think,
And I think both is a yes and no is kind of
yeah,
is the right answer, probably, right?
it's never been an easy race to win,
Yeah.
right? There's never been a situation where it's been easy. So I think it really just comes down to what perspective you're looking at that from. I would say it's definitely over these last few years, and I would expect this year to be the same. It has unquestionably become harder to come from behind to win the Indy 500. So I guess on those grounds, I would say it is harder now, because I think there's just, by the nature of how the cars race and how they work in dirty air, and how good the good cars are that are up at the front, and the good drivers and teams, there's fewer mistakes. You have the good guys in the good cars are like gonna be there, right? um so certainly the field and the teams are as stacked as they've ever been. That makes the difficulty level high. But in addition to that, I would say there have certainly been times in the past where the cars were just, the way their arrow and, whatever the situation was you could kind of get shuffled back. You could be outside the top 10 with a couple of stints to go, and if you just had everything dialed, um, not necessarily maybe needing to have the absolute best car in the field, you could sort of work your way back up into a position of contention, where then at that point maybe you just get a little bit of the musical chairs at the end of the race, and it works in your favor. And I feel like now you really only see that dynamic happening with the cars that are up there at that point. I mean, these last few years, you really just haven't seen anybody who wasn't in contention for a big chunk of the race working their way into that position late in the race. So it's become a little bit of a longer game, I think, from that point of view, which fundamentally just takes you. I think the other way to look at that is, if you haven't been able to make the right moves in that long game, you're sort of out of contention earlier now than I think it has been in the past.
So many storylines. Obviously, Josef going for three in a row, which has never been done before. You've got two superstars in Alex Palou and Pato Award, who have yet to win the Indy 500, and both certainly obviously have a great chance at it this year. One of the storylines, and you kind of know the history of Prema. Here's a brand new team coming on the scene. Uh, what? Tell me, how do you handicap what they're about to go up against this week, and then when they come back in May?
Yeah, I mean, I think this week for them, particularly with Robert, is just going to be just try to get comfortable and
Yeah.
try to make the cars predictable. And that may be at the expense of doing as much race running or really, get it. You by definition have to start getting more aggressive with the race car, with the setup of the race car,
At
if you
some
really
point.
want to feel like you can work your way through even just a pack of a couple of cars now. So it's kind of a tricky thing to figure out for young drivers or rookie drivers that don't have that much time around the place is okay, it might making it comfortable for you to be out there on your own actually makes it less comfortable once you get into traffic, and that's the disparity there is kind of significant actually in terms of the way that it's going to feel in those two scenarios. So I mean, you'll talk to a lot of the guys that have had great runs at the speedway, whether that be in qualifying or the race, and they'll sort of tell you like, if you end up once you've tuned the car for race traffic and to be able to run inside the top 10, if you ever end up out there completely by yourself, you will have the tools like maxed out in the opposite direction
Right.
just to try to like you're kind of Pato Award last year, hanging on for dear life. Like just watching his onboard was giving me sweaty palms. So, um, there's a little bit of that you'll be trying to build confidence as quickly as possible so that you can start working the car into the window that it's just gonna need to be basically when you start to approach the race situation. As a team, personally, they've got a lot of good people there. I love that they've got Ryan Briscoe in house because he's just I was kind of he was around at Foyt when I was there for a couple of years, and just really liked it. He has a very level-headed approach and has been doing a little bit more driver coaching, been back inside the IndyCar paddock with some other teams for the last few years. So I think that he'll definitely be somebody who can just bring, I think, a necessary level of recent experience and sort of calm to what they're doing. Callum, I think Callum, I was always impressed with Callum on the ovals. I mean, I was around him in his rookie year, followed him around at a few places and was like, man, this guy's definitely got the requisite skill set here to be good here, to be good at these places, and had some good finishes over that period of time. But hard to be in that position without having been in a position previously where you were really able to feel like this is what it's like to be in an ass kicking car around this place. I was really fortunate to get that early in my career. Like you just knew right away, like, oh, okay, this is how it's supposed to feel,
Right.
and that sticks with you forever. They don't really have that built into the driver lineup there, I don't think. So, um, it's going to be a matter of trying to move through things as efficiently as you can, but not moving too fast because that quickly turns into one step forward, two steps back.
I like what you said about Ryan. I completely agree. Calmness is what he brings to it, and it's just good to have him back around the IndyCar series too. Last thing, I know you haven't been at the Speedway to compete in a couple of years. I got to ask you, do you miss it a little bit?
Oh man,
Yeah.
yeah, more than anything else, definitely in the motorsport world. Lots of things that I've been fortunate to do, and um, whatever. But the speedway for me, I know it's this way for a lot of guys. It's the place that you kind of go to sleep thinking about and wake up in the morning, like like I wonder if this would work there, or just running it through your head. I mean, I was thinking about this the other day. I must have 20,000 laps around the place, over 12 500s and all the test days and all the practice and all that kind of stuff. But it just sticks with you, and it's one of those places that just lives up to the hype every time. Like as a race car driver, you're looking for a certain kind of feeling when you get in a race car, and a part of that's how it feels, part of that's the speed of it, all of those things. But the speedway is still qualifying at Indy in particular is like you are on the ragged edge, and there's no question whether when you're there, there's no question about it, and as a driver, it's one of those places, it's a place and a circumstance that just being able to tolerate that commitment level and stay within yourself and do all of those things, it uniquely challenges you at like a level of magnitude to do those things that you sort of just don't get from a lot of other races, a lot of other racetracks. So yeah, I'm definitely, it's been a bummer not to be there the last couple of years for sure, but it's always I feel like I've gotten the odd phone call about showing up and being on standby or being ready to fill in or whatever. And so that kind of keeps you, I don't know if that's a blessing or a curse. Like it keeps me mentally engaged enough to be ready to just like jump in and go. But yeah, I mean, it's uh it's just such a cool place. And like I said at the beginning, like I'm so fortunate to have been able to call Indianapolis home for such a long part of my motorsport journey because despite anything that's gone on there, it's definitely paid me back from that point of view.
I mean, it's such a magical place, and it's not just one storyline at the end of the day. There's 33 storylines that are being told each and every race. I mean, you go back to Nolan Siegel in qualifying last year. To your point earlier, the kid wasn't going to lift. He was doing everything he could to make the show, and it's stuff like that is inspiring. Let me say this: I know you've been a fan favorite since your rookie year at the Speedway, and your thoughtfulness, if you want to call it that, in everything you do is inspiring. So thank you for that. I'm laying it on again, pretty thick, aren't I? Thanks for doing this. I hope we get to see you during the month of May as well. And I'll just say we're all smarter now for having to listen to you for 30 minutes.
I hope so. I'm doing my best, Dave. So I'll hopefully catch you out in Indy.
Thanks, JR. Countdown to May's on. Thanks, pal.